Welcome everyone to the Museum of the Moving Image online. My name is Sonia Epstein and I am our Associate Curator of Science and Film, and it is my great pleasure to be here tonight honoring and talking about the film My Zoe with the one and only Julie Delpy.
Hi Sonia, how are you?
I'm good. I have a lot of questions for you about this film that I'm excited to talk to you about. So I will start with that. And for folks watching who have their own questions, you're welcome to chat them in the chat on the side there. And we will hope to get to them in about 20 or 30 minutes. But to start, I wanted to start first, Julie, with the sort of setting of the film. Mm-hmm. It's very clear from the production design and the set details that this film takes place at a very particular time. I'm thinking, of like the look of the cell phone and, certain technological things, but then also, maybe the technology that comes into play in the later half of the film. And I'm curious how you decided when you wanted to set this movie and if that had anything to do with the reproductive science, medicine that you get into, or not.
Yeah, well, it's a science that is, actually all the medical science is growing tremendously, without us even knowing. Like 10 years ago, I found out I have a macular condition in my retina that at the time, 10 years ago, a doctor told me, eventually you'll go blind. And then recently I went to see a doctor still thinking I will go blind eventually in my 80s or whatever. And he told me, oh no, that's not anymore. You won't go blind. It's all that kind of, so I, even of my own condition, I didn't even know the progress were made in the meantime that I was dealing with my life. You know what I mean? So it's a constant, like technology on a medical side, it's growing. I mean, it's evolving every second of the day. So, and then, I was thinking I was speaking with someone actually in China about like technology and everything. And it's like, well, what has changed is the last 20 years. Like it was prior to my film, 2 years prior to my films. And he was saying your computer and your cell phone, your kitchen hasn't really changed in any way. Your living room hasn't changed much, maybe the TV, but little changes, it's flatter and stuff, but really your phone and your computer are the two things that are evolving really. And even not that much, so it's not like crazy. So even in the next 10 years, I think, it's not going to be, Back to the Future with flying cars and, people are trying those things, but it's super dangerous, whatever, to fly and stuff. So we're not there yet. You know what I mean? So it's kind of in a future that is kind of now, and also it mirrors the reality of the reproductive science, which is a future that is now, because, it's really that close, to how far we are from it, it.
It being human cloning, perhaps.
No, but like the technology is there. So it's a question of our ethics and everything that, we are capable of holding it together, but it's a question of time before, it happens in a way. I believe, and pretty much a lot of scientists believe that as well,
Yeah, and I want to get to that because I, as I was watching the film, obviously this question of ethics comes up, and I really admire the way that you in the film address that kind of head on. I mean, it is a direct question to your character in the film. Does this bother you? And that's definitely one of my favorite moments, where it's not like you have a whole complicated answer to that question. It's you answer it very simply and very directly, and then you leave it open as to what the audience might think about that. Was that always the way? I don't know if you want to respond to that, but was that always the way?
No, I mean, it was always the way I wanted the film to be. Is that not, when people tell me, oh, so you're pro cloning, I'm like, no, it's not what the film is about. It's really about, just a journey that I'm a witness of in a way. And I am creating it, but I'm also more or less a witness of it mostly, and I just want people to be a witness as well and decide for themselves how they feel. And of course, morally that is wrong, but the journey goes through the suffering and the love of a mother, and not some kind of sci-fi kind of like, despotic, leader or some crazy thing like that. It's actually, it's not for money, it's not for this or that, it's just out of pure love. And it might be madness and it might be wrong, but it's, the impulse is not something destructive, So I wanted to approach it that way, to give it, because I think when we talk about it, we see all the negative, but we actually don't see the positive of cloning, which I know it's crazy to say that, but there is something to be said about like whatever derivative that will come from it could be really not necessarily, cloning humans left and right, but maybe helping people that have health issues or, spinal injury and, things like that, that should be, that, I mean, no one will say no to walking again, for example, or having their children walk again. I mean, yes, some people will say no to it, but most people won't, so that's what I'm saying,
No, that's super interesting. I mean, it does. I don't know if anyone watching or if you saw this, but there was an article in the Times recently about the cloning of a black-footed ferret, and they went and its reintroduction, and it's a species that was extinct, and I think they cloned it from a ferret that was like a different strain of the same species that had been like cryopreserved since the 80s.
Wow.
So not so dissimilarly, I mean, dissimilar for sure. But in terms of the technology, I think there is a big discussion on the science side about the ethics of cloning as it relates to extinction, and these questions of who, who do we...
that we don't drive every species to extinction and we don't have to clone them. That would be a better solution. But
yes,
if unfortunately our greediness and lack of mindfulness drives us to destroy everything. I mean, that film, like, about extinction a few years ago, like completely was a traumatic, witnessing of, the destruction of so many beautiful species. But the truth is, maybe, technology might save ourselves from the horrible thing that we've done, also,
Yeah, I mean, but I think that all these questions are important, and and just because the answer isn't always so simply technological, like there are these questions. So I think it's really great that a film like yours, which isn't just about those questions, weaves it in a very human way, where...
Because people, are very scared of cloning, but they're not scared of destroying entire countries, or like, or like bombing, So it's interesting that I think it's because it touches on a subject matter that makes people uncomfortable, which is what defines us.
Yeah.
What are we? Are we cells? What defines our unicity and also our mind and who we are? It's I think for a lot of people, they don't want to hear that genetic is a lot of what is made of us. Our genetics is a lot what defines us. And, the truth is, it is so obvious. And at one point, my character talks about it, the way she smiles, the way she talks, her voice, her hair, the color, this, so many things will be there. It might not be her, but, I know it sounds crazy, but it's close enough. It will never replace that child. It's clear, but I'm not trying to say otherwise,
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But it's the closest thing to this child that it will be, And it won't be some crazy, weird person that has the memory of the death or that comes back from the death. It's not going to be a zombie. It's going to be a twin, basically.
Not a computer program, but...
Yeah. She's not going to be some weird, crazy person that's going to try to kill you or stuff like that. You know what I mean? It's not going to be that, because the reality is, it wouldn't be true to say that. It would be a lie based on science. So,
yeah, just as you said, I think that the film really does sort of provoke these fundamental questions about, what is life, who decides how it can be lived, who decides, who gets to reproduce and how, and those are all, questions that are political and social.
It's fully in the hands of the woman, and to me that was important, because you can also read the film in different level. I think, it's clearly her decision to do this, and even at the end, the person that helps it to actually happen, there's the man scientist, but really it's his wife that makes it happen. And I think that's really important for me to make it clear that it is in the hands of those women, basically. And to me, that was important. Also, you know, for me, what was important is, you know, and what I think makes some people uncomfortable, and that includes women, is the film is about, you know, going against what is expected of the role of a woman and a mother, which is mourning, right? We've been taught for generations that we have to mourn our children, just because the fact that when we were giving birth, many children would die. And actually, Noam Chomsky was explaining that the little angels that go to heaven is actually, the little baby angel is actually the dead children. And probably heaven was invented by women to soothe the anxiety of the death of and the mourning of their children at birth. And I think it's a beautiful idea that, you know, like for me, it was important that the character refuses to accept the role that is given to all women, which is mourning, shutting up, and going on with the suffering, right? She goes against that, you know. Usually the woman is the one nagging in the back saying, don't do that, to the man who's like doing what's not acceptable by society or goes beyond what's acceptable, you know, good or bad, actually. And here the woman is the driving force that goes against what is acceptable, right? And to me, that was really, really important. The film could be read also as a custody battle. And at the end, she wins full custody. You know, if you want to think it could be an allegory of that, you know, but it's also about this idea of King Solomon. I've always loved that idea, that story, you know, the cutting in half of a child. You know, is it possible to keep a child alive when you cut it in half? And
there is that, your character has that line very early on in the film where I think she says, it's like I'm missing half the life,
which is exactly what happens when you share a child with someone. You miss half their life. And it's really tough, you know. So that's why when people, for me, the film is about that as well, you know. And then she has to recreate a child completely, because I think when you separate from someone, the child that you used to raise with that person is no more. It's a new child that you have to rebuild, that is going to be your child in those half of his life, and it's going to be someone else's child. And then that person becomes their own person. But I mean, at first it's kind of like you have to recreate that child in a way, and at least your relationship with that child.
Yeah, it sounds painful.
Painful.
To go a step further in terms of what you're saying, in terms of those sort of roles that are accepted, I also think it's interesting that I think you probably very purposefully put a shot in the film of like a much older woman, you know, being pregnant. And then also, you know, at the end of the film, Richard Armitage's character, you know, he has a new kid too. And that is, you know, socially acceptable, normal, you know, for a man, you know, the sort of that kind of not starting over, but reproduction in that sense for a man is not
an issue. So, you know, it's interesting for me. It's good you noted that, because it's like he went on and had another kid. He mourned by rebuilding his life. She, as a woman in her 40s, late 40s, she really had no, she was not going to rebuild her life unless what she did. You know, her life was destroyed. Her life was gone, finished, done. As a mother, she was never going to be a mother again, right? So unless you adopt or you get a dog, but I mean, it's not the same.
One or the other. It's
not
fine.
the same. So anyway, I mean, I nothing against pets or pet owners, but you know, it's like women are limited in that sense, and it's a heartbreaking kind of condition to be. I mean, I've always said, every day of my life, I've said to myself, why was I born a woman? And I tell you, I'm saying that, and I know I'm a feminist, or you know, I'm proud to be a woman, and I'm fighting in my own way to be who I am and stuff. But every day of my life, since I'm a little girl, I was like, why was I born a woman?
Because you
Why
saw
did I have to,
yeah.
and I say it in one of the before movies, and it's been a magnet in my whatever magnet metal cabinet for 20 years. It's like women explore for eternity in the vast garden of sacrifice, because to me that is what women are, and it's just like so unbelievable that, and yes, there are progress and we're doing better and there's more equality, a little more, not there yet, but and the only thing to me that really had a little bit of plus of being a woman is giving birth, right? We have that little plus of that connection, right? That I feel is very strong. And in a way, this man is trying to rip away the motherhood from her. He's trying to kill her, to kill the only extra little bit that she had over him, that connection with this child, and that connection is destroyed. So it's really a film about all this. So I know it's a lot, but it's
No, I think that's beautifully
understand
said.
and not be like cloning, dirty girl, you should be mourning. And even women could do that to me. You should be mourning, you should be a good woman and cry and accept the fact, but that's the way it is. And I've read people kind of getting angry at me about this film and reacting in a way that was, we don't want to say this word, but a form of misogyny that's obviously systemic and very, very deep, even in women.
No, I think it's such social and cultural. So
mourn and
it's not,
accept fate. That's what women should do. It sucks, dude. We're not there yet. I love saying dude. I always say dude, sorry.
No, that's fine with me. Yeah, I mean, I definitely can, I think it is, in that sense, it's a film, to put it one way, about taking back control, and it is, in a sense, I mean, just hearing you talk about it feels empowering in the way that it identifies the ways that she's, kind of stripped of control by, various actors, both socially, culturally, and, in her life. So
yeah, he's trying to steal the motherhood out of her. He's trying to suck it out, he's trying to negate that little extra thing that women have. And it's funny, because if you live in California, that's really what's happening here. In the name of equality and giving men equal rights, it's like it's equality only when it suits men. It's not equality when it's an interesting world. My mom fought for women's rights, and I'm like, she must be twisting in her grave. She's not in a grave, she's burned, but it must be pretty tough to see all this for her.
It's definitely not over. And so we've talked a little bit about how, maybe some of the reactions you've had to the film. I did note in the credits, I always look for this since I cover a lot of films sort of at this intersection, that you had, I think, 7 medical advisors and 2 science advisors from all over the world. I think it was like China, Russia, Sweden. So I'm curious, how you found these people and how they worked with you, and maybe what the sort of general response was to your premise.
Well, I had friends, doctors, researchers reading the scripts. I have friends in many different worlds. I'm not, I have doctor friends. I really like doctors. I get along with them. I have, the thing about, the word in Hebrew about losing a child, a parent losing a child, was said by a rabbi I know. I mean, I have friends also of all different kind of culture, Muslims, Jewish, also religious wise. I know a lot of people that I'm not religious, but I know a lot of people of different kind of thing, because I always like point of views of different people. If they're smart, it's not, it doesn't matter to me. And then a lot of scientists, of course, kind of overviewed everything, doctors, for all the medical part and stuff. Yes, I mean, I love that stuff. So for me, it was a kind of the fun part of doing that research and discussing with people, all that stuff,
That's great. That it sounds fun to me. I don't know that everyone is always so, um, it looks to include people at the maybe level of development. Yeah, I think people sometimes come
Well,
in
I
and look at
had
like the
to,
set
because, you know,
dressing.
people can be so, I mean, I know how people can be so like, oh, what is she talking about? She doesn't know what she's talking about. Well, it's not me, it's those guys. Then talk to the geneticist if he doesn't know what he's talking about, just, yeah.
Yeah. So was there any reaction that any of them had to the sort of premise that you were presenting that I mean, I'm just mostly curious how they reacted if they did, or maybe they were just looking at specific parts of the script more for,
Yeah, no, I
technical
gave them
details.
like specific parts and, like, is
Yeah.
this accurate? Can I do this? It's like, no, that's pushing it. And sometimes actually what I did with the film is that I simplified some stuff because I was getting a little too technical. Like I was actually explaining exactly how you do it, and I kind of had to
Yeah.
strip down and make it like a simplified version because everyone was like, who cares? Like no one cares about those details, I was like obsessive with the medical details. So I just let it go a little bit and had to be a more narrative kind of like fiction, thing more than a medical,
Yeah.
study on the subject matter.
Yeah.
I would have bored
So
everyone. I mean, not that it's, I just simplified things to make it a story.
absolutely. I mean, I think you have to for
Yeah,
a
yeah, yeah,
narrative
of
film,
course.
and
I mean,
that's
of
not
course.
to,
And maybe some stuff is not exactly accurate because I knew it was going to be too complicated to explain. You know what I mean? The all the side stuff and stuff, but it's accurate enough that I don't think people would be like, you're crazy. You know what I mean? There's no way a scientist would tell me that. They're like, oh, maybe it's a little bit ahead of its time, but that's the whole point, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. We have a lot of questions, so I want to leave the right amount of time for that. And actually, one of them dovetails on a question that I wanted to ask anyway, which is about the music in the film, or maybe lack thereof. Stacy says the quiet is so quiet. She enjoyed the credit piano music composed and performed by you. Was the soundtrack a creative or a budgetary decision? And just to add to that, this is a film that you had multiple roles, right? I mean, not only writer, director, but also star and also, composer. So in terms of
Yeah, I
those
mean,
multiple roles, but
I
yeah,
thought about music for a while, and as I was trying pieces of music there and there, temp music, you try that during editing. Every time it bothered me because it kind of made a decision for the viewer to feel one way or another. And I felt this kind of film, because of the subject matter, because of how harsh sometimes it is, I felt by putting music, you were making it a little bit, like, like sugarcoating it or making it, people love to cry. I didn't even want people to necessarily cry to this story. And the way the actual screenplay is built is more like a thriller in a way. And I could have added that too, but I didn't want either to be a thriller. So, it's built like one, but it's actually a drama, but without being melodramatic. And the only moment where I let go of it was the moment with the little music, what is it called? The little, the thing you rewind, I forgot, with the baby,
the music
the
box.
music box. Yeah, the music
Yeah,
box is
yeah,
the only music, and the song that I sing to my daughter. But outside of that, there is no music, and the only music, because in a way, I was thinking of when I went through the loss of my mother. I was dealing with so much pain, but there was no music. I mean, what the fuck? Who? I mean, yes, you put music in films, but I was thinking of the struggle and journey and suffering, and there's no music, in
yeah.
life, and it's like you're just alone in this silence, And to me, that was very, very important. And I worked a lot on post sound and everything, but the machines, the hospitals, the kind of like emptiness, it felt right to do it that way. And maybe people think
Yeah.
it's pretentious or something, but I think sometimes music is pretentious. So I don't know. It was not out of pretension. It was out of like true kind of exploration of suffering without any kind of cuteness around it, you know. Music is relaxing, you know. It's not really not really my goal here.
It's not the mood. Yeah.
No, not the mood. It would have directed people into a direction of how they feel about it, you know, and it's not there, you know.
Yeah, no, I think for sure that's one of the very admirable things about it. I think it's very brave.
And it's brave because some people might find that irritating because they want to be told what to feel. They want to be told what direction to go in their emotions. And there's less and less, I feel like we're more and more being told how to feel, you know, by what we're watching. And I just don't like it, you know, in a way.
From Benjamin, he says, the movie is wonderfully messy. It's personal and not necessarily about absolutes. Can you talk a little about Gemma Arterton's character decision not to comment on how your character talks about her daughter in the present tense?
Why she doesn't comment on it? Because she understands that for this mother, it is not possible to use the past tense for that child. She's not able to, she in a way, she's refusing the reality, you know, and she's already in another journey. I mean, she's like, you know, people deal in different ways with loss. You know, some people mourn and some people get angry. Some people live in a world of fantasy and some people fight back and some people, so there's all sorts of way of mourning. And often we're being told that this is the way, but I feel like, you know, I've seen people mourning. I've seen people at the feet of their loved one dead, you know, trying to beat up nurse. That was their reaction, anger. You know, I've seen people leaving the country. I've known someone that lost their child. They've vanished from this earth. You know, they've changed their life completely, gave up everything. So everyone is different, you know. So I feel like the character of Isabel is not accepting the reality of the past tense for that child. She never will. And in a way, that's what makes her do what she does, you know.
And they understand each other. It's very, you know, I think you see the extent to which they sort of come to an understanding of each other in the film.
Yeah. And I think she has a lot of empathy. She has a tremendous amount of empathy. The other guy is like, it's a mix, you know, he's sad, but it's also his little, like, you know, Frankenstein, you know, side. He wants to do something, you know, crazy, but, you know, she's just pure empathy towards this woman.
Yeah. From Kim, she says that she saw your appearance at TIFF, Toronto International Film Festival, for those who don't know, and the problems that you've had with the financial funding for this film. And I know I've read that it took you about 8 years from the time it starts, and films are always, you know, take a long time, but it's, anyway, and the question is, do you think the situation has gotten better or worse for female filmmakers?
It must depends who and what kind of film, you know.
Yeah.
I guess a lot of big companies are hiring female directors right now to do big films and stuff, but is it their story? Is it their voice? Or is it just, you know, a for-hire job? I mean, when you try to keep your own stuff happening, it's super hard. It's still super hard. It was hard before, it's hard now. You know, I didn't have the budget I should have had. I mean, it wasn't a big budget. You know, not that I'm saying people should throw money at me. It's obviously not an easy story. So, you know, I'm not expecting, and I think I was just really, really lucky the film happened, you know, because I many times, it was more likely for it not to, I mean, I always say it's probably easier to clone a kid than to make this film happen. I mean, it's to keep humor to the thing, you know.
Yeah, just put that on the poster.
It's probably true, believe it or not.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure I've never made a film, but I'm sure that there's something about it that
this film in particular was like, you know, I bet you it's technically it would be like the amount of time, the amount of trying, the amount of fighting, probably with that same amount of energy, you could have actually cloned the kid. Well, you need more money to clone a kid, but that's pretty much it. I know that's a horrible thing to say. People are going to be like, what is she talking about? But it's true.
Don't worry. I think everyone can understand the sentiment, at least.
The sentiment of it, yeah.
Delisa has a question that I think I've read you comment on before, maybe in the context of casting, but Delisa says that she was struck by the common thread between your character and James and how they were both so devoted to Zoe, even, you know, with questionable actions, yet their relationship is so deeply steeped in cruelty. As you were writing this, did you ever consider the relationship being less stark?
No, because I think, you know, it's weird. They really, 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 their relationship is horrible. It's the worst that it can possibly be, you know, but at the same time, I believe it's true, you know, and when I see separation films, I'm always like, what is this? A Disney movie? You know, it's like I'm annoyed to not see the cruelty and the viciousness. And it's not just me. It's like me observing friends going through separation with kids in the middle. And I'm like, they're ready to destroy. I mean, I've seen men ready to destroy women, women ready to destroy men, to destroy them to the ground without thinking that destroying one of the parent would actually hurt the kid. Like they become so full of hatred, you know, especially when it's the person leaving you, you know, like it's just insane, the rage and the violence that goes into it. I mean, it's one of the most violent thing I've witnessed in my life. You know, people separating with a kid. I've seen people going through, I mean, I've really seen things that are one of the most vicious and violent fights and things people say to each other. So to me, it was really true. It was not, I couldn't imagine less than that. If anything, I made it less that my natural impulse would have been. There could have been more hatred, more viciousness. So to tell you, and their love for their kids is completely separate. They adore this child and they're both good parents on each side, you know, but together they just hate each other. Yeah. Pure hate.
The dialogue is great.
It's beyond hate. It's love that became hate. It's the worst kind of hate. It's love that turned to hate, you know, and
they definitely know how to hurt each other. I think that.
Because it's like you've opened someone up and now you know everything that's inside that person to actually rip them apart. So that's what it is. Yeah.
Related to the casting of James, there is a question from Nora that says, could you discuss the terrific international casting? Did you have any issues getting the actors you wanted? And then just to add to that, you know, in terms of, we're talking about the character of James, why did you think of Richard for that role?
Well, you know, he came to me actually, and I was talking to different actors, and every time I was hearing the same thing, can you make him nicer? Can you make him nicer? And it was really weird to me because I was even talking to actors that have played serial killers and they had no problem playing serial killers, chopping up women, but suddenly to play an abusive man, which is, by the way, how many women die in America, for example, every week? It's like 3 to 4 women killed by their husband or boyfriend. So we're talking, and I'm not even talking physical violence. I'm just talking pure anger and violence and like psychological violence. People didn't want to hear about it. They were terrified, right? To impersonate that character. They were scared to be this so unlikable person. And in a way, Richard, by embracing that, he had no problem with it. He gave him humanity because he understood. He was the only intelligent person I spoke to, actor. No, I'm not saying the other actors were not intelligent, but he had the intelligence. He's an extremely, very subtle person, and he had the intelligence to understand that this violence is rooted in insecurity. And in a way, by embracing this anger and violence, he made him more human. So it was really, really beautiful work that he did, you know. And for Gemma, she was really drawn to the project because she loved the part, even though it was just a few days' work and stuff. And Daniel is the reason why the film happened, because he read it. He's a friend of mine for years, and he read it, fell in love with the story, and said, we have to make this film happen. So he took it to his production in Berlin, and that's how the film happened, basically because of Danielle. So he was an essential part of the, you know, and he loved that part also, the crazy scientist and stuff. And he had fun doing it too, you know.
He's great in it. And I know you two have worked together on a lot of projects. So.
Yeah. No, he's great. And it's thanks to him. Otherwise the film would have, you know, I had wonderful producers, but they were struggling a great deal. And then we had a great also financiers coming in last minute, Andrew Levitas. Otherwise the film would have not happened. We had financing falling through from Korea. That was like a week before prep, you know, really difficult times.
Yeah. I think I would be remiss.
My mother, she's great also, you know.
Oh, the actress who plays your mother.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, you two, I love her as an actress.
So anyway, it was really, and the little girl also was amazing. She just did such a good job in such a difficult part. So
I was wondering actually if you always planned on having that same actress play, you know, the sort of Zoe 1, Zoe 2. So did you ever,
there was a way to have another one because a clone is a genetic twin.
Yeah.
It's an identical twin.
Yeah.
That's all it is, really. A clone is an identical twin.
Yeah.
So yeah, there was no way to have someone else play her. Originally, I wanted to, if I had had the luxury to do it, I wanted to shoot her younger for the end. So she was like at 6 years old, and then shoot 3 years later with the same actress, Zoe, you know what I mean? So it wouldn't be 7 years later, but you know, 5 years later, like the kid is younger. So that would have been really shocking to see that, but that couldn't happen. So, I mean, we were far from this kind of budget. So anyway.
Well, it works nonetheless. I do want to ask before we run out of time. So anybody who has any last pressing questions, they can write them in. But I want to be sure to ask just about really the genesis of this idea for you about the film, because it is a really unusual film, you know, that deals with a lot of, you know, all the things we've touched on about marriage and loss and children and science and, you know, ethics and all these things. And, you know, you obviously put, you know, so much into it as a writer, director, and star. So, and you worked on it for so long. So how did it sort of, you know, take shape for you? Was it?
Well, you know, weirdly enough, I mean, outside of all the story behind it and you know, the thing about like refusing to accept the fate and all this, which is something I actually discussed with Kieslowski very early on. That came from discussions and, you know, about being a woman and women having to accept fate more than men and you know, and loss and all that. And so it started really early, you know, and weirdly enough, the first story I ever wrote when I was like 9 years old was a sci-fi story, and it was about motherhood. So it was sci-fi related to motherhood, not the same story, but somehow similar. So I'm kind of obsessed with this idea of motherhood and sci-fi in a weird way. But way before I was a mother, I was 9 years old, obviously. But also there was some visuals in my head that I couldn't get out of my head, which was very important when I worked with the DP, you know, a simplicity, but yet those hallways of hospitals and the distance between people and the cage where they fight, the glass, you know, world where they're, you know, because what was really always in my mind visually when I was doing the film, and each time I've been through loss in hospitals and stuff, is like, it feels like you're in a waiting room all the time. You're waiting for something to happen or not happen. You're waiting for death to happen. And, you know, and I wanted to create that visual thing. Also, it was so strong in my mind, those hallways, like, you know, it being in a state of emergency or waiting. It's always something in those hallways and rooms, the color, the light, you know, the grayness. Yeah, like, to me, I'm obsessing with, you know, I was obsessed with translating this grayness of the journey towards death, and then towards this reproductive world, also kind of white, and, you know, there's not much warmth in all this, you know, and to me that was important to capture that as well visually. I did a lot of work with the DP, and it seems kind of natural and messy sometimes and stuff, but it was really months of thinking it and planning it. Even that fight in the cage, you know, it took us like weeks of looking for that place, you know. That it
was that a real location, or was that a
the
set?
location? It's a location. Eventually, we almost thought of building it, but we didn't have the budget. But eventually, we found the location that I wanted.
So that's exactly the scene that I was thinking about, where your character is sitting down, and James is standing and
oh yeah, the kind of like the power, yeah, that feeling, you know, and yeah, it's very like it suffocates you, and that's usually that's what abuse is. It's this feeling that someone is, you know, over you, kind of trying to kill you, you know. It's a terrible thing. And you know, abuse is that, you know, and it can come from a woman to a man, but this feeling of like crushing you, you know, I mean, yeah, it's a terrible thing.
Yeah. We have a question that I think is a good one to sort of start to wrap things up around, from Hadassah, who points out that Zoe is Greek for life, and is wondering if the name was picked deliberately for that.
It is. My husband is Greek, so
Oh.
I just I know a little bit about Greek words and meanings and stuff. He's always telling me, oh, that's a Greek word. Oh, that comes from the Greek this, and this from the Greek this. So I'm constantly, you know, it's like, it's pretty funny in the everyday life. But, you know, the truth is a lot of words come from Greek, and Zoe actually is a certain kind of life. It's a life that starts again and again. So it's not just life, it's a life, like a constant going on life, which I think is very. And then they look, I love when they look at the jellyfish, because it's like one of my favorite creature. It's like they keep on going if you don't destroy them. A lot of jellyfish are,
yeah, they're like immortal. That's it's in a sense that I think it's one of the animals that they're using to study like aging.
Yeah, they don't really age. They don't have a, one of the first creature on earth. I love jellyfish. I always touch them, even when I'm not I touch jellyfish. It doesn't depends on the jellyfish, obviously.
They don't sting.
I like to play. I like to touch jellyfish. I do, actually.
Well, when you find, I mean, when you find like the dead ones floating in the sea, and they're so, they do look amazing. But I know that scene that you're talking about in the film where you're going.
Yeah, and it's so beautiful. You can watch jellyfish for hours and hours and hours and not even know, you know, and lose sense of time.
Yeah. So, well, to wrap things up a little bit, I'm curious both what you're working on now, if you feel like talking about that at all, and also if you don't, or maybe in addition, how now sort of being on the other side of this film, or at least seeing a different part of its life in terms of, you know, it reaching audiences, how you maybe reflect on some of the issues that we've talked about and that it brings up, having to do with, you know, reproductive rights, control, you know, those sorts of issues, if making the film or seeing its, you know, life in the world has changed or affected the way you think about those things at all. And that might be too personal and you don't have to answer.
No, it's not personal, because I mean, I don't really, you know, a film is a film, and it expresses something. And I think the film has many layers you can read, and, you know, it could be about, you know, child custody battle. It could be about not accepting reality. It could be about, you know, also really about changing the perception of what the role of women is and has always been, and to break that mold, you know, in a way. It has a lot to do with that. And I've always done that in a way, in my own limited way, which is that, you know, I think, you know, it's important for women filmmakers to really try to express that, you know, we are not just, you know, like when people tell me, oh, the world will be a better place if it's ruled by women. Women are complex individuals, and they're not perfect, and they're full of complexity and flaws, and, you know, and I think it's interesting to show another woman who's not necessarily, you know, what you expect of a woman to be, and what she does is unexpected and stuff. And for me, that's important, to keep on some people will criticize it, but for me, it's important to keep on going in that journey, you know, of doing that over, keep on doing that, you know. So eventually, you know, people will be okay with, you know, not women being what they should be in the role of that is given to them. And also now what I'm doing right now, I'm doing a TV show about women, you know, women in their 40s and 50s. And then I'm doing, I have another project. I'm doing a movie about movies, a movie about movies, but about movies kind of through the eyes of a family and a child. And it's about happiness, you know, about like, you know, movie, you know, like when you dream of movies when you're a kid, it's kind of like that, you know, kind of a fun, kind of like to take away the darkness of Hollywood and put it back into like some kind of playful, fun world, you know.
That sounds great. I can't wait. I mean, I think,
but I'm finishing my show right now. I still have a lot of work. So
just what you're saying about the like women sort of acting in unexpected ways, or to extrapolate a little bit, I mean, I think if we look at sort of the state of our world right now, which is and has been for a while, you know, in this sort of state of crisis, a lot of addressing that is going to have to come from sort of thinking outside of the box. So I think that, you know, that's a great exercise. It's something we all need to do all the time. And so to the extent that, you know, I think that your film, you know, plays a role in challenging expectations about, you know, what should happen or what's right and whether you think that's wrong or right. It's I'm glad for the chance to sort of talk about these things that aren't always so easily talked about when they're solely based in like the real world, so to speak.
yeah. No, and I think by making it a bit sci-fi, I'm like exploring, you know, sci-fi is a way to explore something, you know, an uncharted territory emotionally, you know, like it's like, you know, it's not the usual kind of like, okay, a child dies and you're sad and, you know, you deal with it and you know, it's kind of more like, okay, so what is, let's go into a direction that, you know, we haven't gone too often, you know. It's interesting to me, you know.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think that's all the time we have for tonight, but thank you for so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you all for watching, and feel free to tell your friends about the film and look out for it in theaters, hopefully near you sometime soon.
Yes.